To call this meeting of the Coventry Municipal Fire Commission to order at 6:02 p.m. Roll call, Chair Hillary Lima, Vice Chair James LeBlanc,
Here.
Lieutenant McCann, Captain McAloon,
Here.
Bryan Testen,
Here.
Russ McGillivray, Peter Rondeau, Jillian Weinmiller, here, Dan Perillo,
Here.
Bob Svetti, Stephen Angel is absent. Chief Heiss,
Here.
please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. In the event of an emergency, those present this evening can exit out the doors labeled number 1 or 2 in the back of chambers to the back parking lot or front lawn of Town Hall. At this time, we'll take public comment on docketed items only, those items on our agenda this evening. If you'd like to make a public comment, please come to the microphone at the podium, state your name and address for the record. And it doesn't look like anyone's on Zoom, Cody. Thank you. Public comment going once, twice, 3 times. Public comment on docket items is closed. We'll now move to new business for discussion and/or action. We have 2 items this evening. The first one is a PowerPoint presentation and discussion from Bryan Testen on municipal fire staffing projections. This is the presentations in pages 4 to 12 in our packets. Mr. Testen.
Thank you. Do you want to suspend the rules to have like a general discussion, or is that
Could I get a motion to suspend the rules?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Councilman LeBlanc, second by Mr. McGillivray. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Go ahead.
Okay. So last meeting, we started a discussion about manpower, trucks, stations, and I feel like if you're not very close to the fire department, it's easy to, get confused by it pretty quickly. So I thought maybe it'd be better if we put it on a page visually so that you can see what we have at each station today. And I also pulled a few things that I thought were interesting from the dynamics study from a year ago or so. So if we want to just go through the slides, this first one, population density obviously shows where the stations are relative to where the people live. So you can see station 1 in the top right is Anthony, and then stations 4 and 6, Arnold Road, Hopkins Hill, and then out to the left you have station 7 and station 8. So when you go to the next page, what I did was I took census data from 2000, 2010, 2020, just to look at what it was the population in Coventry over the last 2 decades, and what is the growth between those two time periods. And you can see it's pretty nominal, but 4%, and that from one period to the next, 2% from the next period over a 10-year period. So between 0.2 and 0.4% per year. So then I said, what if we project out population going forward for the next 2 decades at those somewhere between those rates? So 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. What are you going to end up at? And then because your fire calls, your EMS calls are going to correlate to how many people you have, at least loosely. So the next page here will show from the study that they did, and I think it was 2022 data, but for an illustrative purpose, where it's like a heat map of where the incidents occur, and obviously the brighter the spot, the more incidents. So station 1, for example, is right in the middle of a high high incident area. Stations 4 and 6 are also in that big heat spot. And then you go out, as you go out western, there's less and less calls as there's less and less people. Speaking of the calls, on the next page, it'll show you what the calls have been the last 4 years or so. And then using the population projections from earlier, and going out to the next 2 decades or so, at those varying rates, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4, you can see a rough estimate of what fire and EMS calls would look like over that period. So you can see that, and who knows, it could be, if population grows more than 0.4% per year because the zoning laws changed, that could have an effect on it as well. So, but this is just to give you a sense of where the fire and EMS calls most likely will go in the short, near future and longer term. Okay, so the next page will show you, going back to manpower, stations, and apparatus, what do we have at each location? Station 1, Anthony, today has 12 people. And as we talked about, with those 12 people, staffs 1 vehicle at a time. Central has Station 4 and Station 7. Station 4 is staffed what we call fully at 16, meaning they can staff, dedicate an engine and a rescue. And then stations 6, 7, and 8 are also cross-manned, as the same as Station 1 is. So today, and I realize that there's nuances here, per diems and all sorts of things. But if you're just looking at how many people do we try to fill the station with on any day of the week, this is kind of what it looks like. What that means is today we have like around 54 folks and 6 trucks in service at any point in time. Is 6 enough? I think everyone that's close to it agrees that it's not enough. It used to be 7. It probably in the near past, before one rescue was taken out of service, but more likely should be either 7 or 8 at this time. So the next page is utilization, which also came from the dynamic study. And what this shows you is the problem that we've tried to illustrate, that this is a way that they did it, but they look at how many hours that those apparatus in service are being assigned to incidents, and those staff are out on calls. And so those particular top 5, you can see, and the benchmark that they used in the study was if it's over 20%, that's beyond what they considered to be the reasonable limit. So those are considered like overworked apparatus. So obviously, if you put an extra truck in service, you alleviate a little bit of pressure on the ones on those top 5. So as you go up from 6 to 7, and then from 7 to 8, each truck it spreads the workload across more staff and across more trucks, so they last longer, et cetera. The next page is what I would. Okay, so everything up until this point has just been facts. These last 2 pages are just purely my opinions. The first thing I would do in the short term is, if you were to just take a look at it at the town as a whole today and say, I could erase the boundaries between the districts and and do it and look at it as a whole. The first thing I would do is get one extra truck into service, go from 6 to 7, and the easiest way to do that is to add 4 firefighters to Station 1 to get you from 12 to 16, and then you have a fully staffed a 7th truck in town. At this moment in time, I would say, let's say a merger occurred or a municipal department occurred. I would just, at the bare minimum, do that and keep 5 stations open, and you could talk about longer term solutions. What the question of whether you want to staff 5 stations, 4 stations, 3 stations, build a super station and close and try to create economies of scale by closing stations. That's a longer term discussion, because it's going to take you X number of years to, like, how long did the police station take to go from an idea to being open, right? So this is the first thing I would the most immediate thing you could do, and then on the next page, what I would say is phase 2 would be to add 8 firefighters to either Station 7 or Station 6, and then at that point start asking yourself, is it does 5 stations make sense, or maybe it's 4, and in which case you could reallocate staff across these and move trucks around a little bit. But I think those that presents the probably, based on the calls that we have today, getting from 6 to 8 from a public safety perspective is probably the best idea. But the issue we have right now is you don't have those boundaries erased. So we're making decisions individually, and would I like to hire 4 more and put that 7th truck into service in my district? Yeah, I would. But 4 extra guys is probably $600,000 fully loaded with everything and the gear and all that. And that in my district represents like a 22% tax increase, which I just couldn't do. But if you were to say, look, as a town, we want to do this, 600,000 on over 100 million is, much smaller and easier to swallow. So that's, not to say that some of these things could be undertaken, if we're serious about solving a public safety problem, we could do this, before even a merger. There's, no reason why we couldn't handle it via an MOA or something between a district and the town. But this is just where we are today, and hopefully a better visual representation of what we talked about last time.
I just want to caution folks with OMA to if we can keep the discussion, if anyone has discussion on this, to just projections, staffing projections numbered. We shouldn't get into platoon. Just want to be careful. So,
Say something?
yeah, go ahead.
Great report. But I respectfully disagree, at least from the western end of things. Our board very much disagrees with the dynamics report. I'm sure you've heard rumblings from us out there, but it doesn't take into account time. I understand that there's a lot of calls on that side of town, but even just today, Rescue 8 was on a call. A call came in at Plainfield Pike, and we needed Rescue 4 to come. So that's at least a 20-minute drive. If you're having a heart attack, 20 minutes, you're dead. I'm sorry. The other thing too is Western is actually staffed 3, sometimes 4 people during the day, not 2. So that changes that a little bit. And then historically, we've been staffed 3 to 4 during the night as well. It's not every day, obviously. We have per diem, so it depends on their schedules and stuff. But our new chief is 3 people religiously during the day, so we can get a second truck out. The other thing too, kind of going back to the time, I mean, you guys have West Warwick right there. If you need another rescue, we have West Greenwich. They've told us that they'll only come if Coventry doesn't have any rescues, and they're still 20 minutes away, and then Foster isn't always staffed. So if we're gonna be putting 2 trucks in service at a station, I would prefer it to be either Station 7 or Station 8, just because you can move a little bit more around in the eastern side of town, where Western, I understand there's not as many calls. Our calls tend to be more severe. We have an aging population out there. And then also just time-wise, difficulty breathing could turn into a heart attack quick. That's just my kind of 2 cents. But great report, though.
There was a rescue at Station 7.
There was.
Which went out of service. So from a geographic perspective, I totally agree. It would make a lot of sense to put that one back in. I was just thinking of, in terms of dollars, what's the shortest way to get you an extra, an extra truck in service? And if I'm already at 12, I could get from 12 to 16 and we'd have one there, Whereas normally you'd need to hire 8 to get it, an extra, if you got a 4 platoon model, right? That's how it would work.
I understand, but if we're going more municipal route, you can shuffle people and trucks around easier, so.
The the time element, I think, can't be overlooked.
Definitely. I mean, we're lucky that something hasn't happened yet. I'm knock on wood, like.
Speak.
Question on phase 1 and phase 2. What is your expected time of phase 1? Are we talking like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? And then same thing for phase 2?
It's totally dependent on who you would ask. I mean, if you were to ask anyone in the fire service, they'd say, we should already be there, right? It's just about dollars, right? We don't, if we could put a 7th in tomorrow, we would.
I hear you. But you said 4 guys is $600K fully loaded. And then phase 2 would be an additional 8 guys, which would be another 1.2 mil. That's just for the guys. That's not for the apparatus. So
we already have the trucks, right? That's kind of the point is, yes, if you put it in service, you're going to have additional costs to maintain them. Yeah.
Agreed. Just thanks.
Who's picking up the slack now for Rescue 7? Is it more Weston or is it more the east side up until?
Like it's a little bit
One.
everywhere.
One is?
You sure your mics are on, guys, if you're.
Okay. So it's-
At any moment in time, it depends who's already out on a call and then who's left, right?
We have seen our calls dramatically increase, though. We have a chief's report each time. It's public knowledge if you want to take a look at it. But off memory, I think our calls have increased from when it was taken out versus now, like 400 a year, just because of mutual aid. Not just because, but it's dramatically increased, just taking one rescue out.
So if I may, runs have definitely gone up, and I'm not in disagreement with anybody's suggestions. However, it's a long ride out. It's a long ride around this town. Talking about today's incident, I was on today's incidents. To go to Plainfield Pike way out there just alone is 9 miles. That's a long ride. You had one guy in a truck out there. So we had engine 7 and we waited for rescue 4. After that call, there was a box at Walmart. God, no fire in the building. Engine 7 was the first to respond. 19 miles. That's a long ride. Long ride. So we have to keep that in mind. Shifting trucks around, that can be done. That's operationally when you have a chief that's able to do that, because it's been done before. They did it years back where if the east end of town had a fire, Weston was moved up to Station 7 and vice versa. So, but as long as we have the manpower and the trucks in service, we can do that. Right now, we can't. So everybody's spread thin. And mutual aid, West Warwick, we talk to them guys all the time. They come in 4 or 5 times, sometimes a day. Yesterday was an occurrence. West Greenwich comes into town a lot. West Greenwich has a long ride from 102 to hop to the London Turnpike. That's where they've done mutual aid calls. That's a long ride for them. So we have to keep that in mind. But time, you have to cut that time down if we all agree to that.
So say the scenario about adding a truck or apparatus in Anthony. Does that involve opening up the other side of the building, getting those bays involved, or it's just still two? Okay.
Just the front. We have 3 bays on the main side, that an engine, a rescue, the ladder. Right now, we cross-man, any one of them goes out depending on what the call is. If we added 4 more people, we would then have a dedicated rescue, a dedicated engine. You know, that team would either field take the engine out or the ladder out.
And my other question was, can you help me with the rationale around swapping out rescue for engine or ladder at Station 7 in Phase 1? I just wanted to understand more the decision, why do ladder over the rescue? The one in
Say
Phase
that again.
1 slide. You have, so in Phase 1,
Yep.
so in the current staffing, it showed in Station 7, there's engine or ladder, and it looks like you swapped it up for rescue. I just wanted to get more detail on that rationale. Under apparatus. Yeah, I just want,
That may have been a mistake.
oh, so you wanted to stay and,
The point is, you want to have probably 5 rescues in town. And so you can, add the staffing, and then depending on where you're adding it, you might want to adjust which trucks go into service and where. But the Phase 1, right now, there's if you're adding, if we have an engine and a rescue in Station 1 dedicated, then I feel like you should try to get to 5 and 3 eventually. But in this case, 5 and 2 I think is better than 4 and 3. But could go either way. It doesn't really matter.
my other question was, so do we have data of what the staffing total is in other municipalities compared to their population? And also, is there a formula that from, say, national firefighting standards that says that maybe combines in the time factor in terms of what you're supposed to have staffed? I truly don't know.
I'm sure there is, because there's those NFPA standards that they do, but I don't know the answer.
I think we need to see what the staffing numbers look like compared to other populations in different municipalities. I think we need to consider those kind of comparisons.
Yeah, and there's certainly some towns that are similarly sized in terms of populations and in terms of, stations.
Yeah.
I think Johnson has 80 if I am.
Yeah, Madam President, so the ICMA, I believe, is that the International City Managers Association? We used a formula while I was in school. It's either 2 to 2.5 firefighters per 1,000. So give or take, I think ICMA uses 2 per 1,000. So that way, if we're at a $40,000 population, you can guess somewhere around 80 firefighters.
Okay.
So that's, we're at 35,000, is probably 70 guys total. He's already at 58, probably more when you put a couple of trucks in service. And also to keep in mind, Engine 4 and Engine 7 are the only dedicated full-time engines in town. They are licensed as advanced life support, non-transporting ambulances. So when they go to the scene, no matter where they go in town, they may not give you the ride to the hospital, but they'll give you the exact same care as one of the ambulances that happens to be out of town at the time. So it's not like they're not servicing, or the taxpayer's not getting their advanced life support right away. That's one of the reasons we send a fire truck ahead on most calls. The 2 guys on there are cardiacs, and it's licensed by the state, carries all the same drugs, has the same equipment as the ambulance, just not the ride.
Okay.
And then we're looking, sorry, go ahead, Councilman.
I was just going to add, so I know you mentioned about 80. I had heard rumblings that the desire was to hire an additional 25. And shockingly, when you take the number 80 minus what we currently have, you get pretty close to that 25 number. And I was told that, or I heard that we wanted 25 as soon as the merger happened. Now, 25 guys, if 4 costs 600,000, can't imagine what 25 would cost. And we certainly couldn't afford that. So,
I don't think there's 25 firefighters looking for work right now.
well, we have
No,
districts that want the guys, that's for sure.
Certainly, that's something to be planned for. Nobody could do 25 right away, unless you're the city of Providence, they run a 40-man academy. Warwick runs 10 or 15, but there's no way.
Couldn't agree more, but we also have existing departments that are already like, don't have enough funding currently that we are supposed to service. So to get to 80, you guys want it, or what I've heard, want it really quick. I just don't see where that money would come from. That's all.
I would say then you're hearing wrong from my point of view. This is something.
You just said 80.
For.
You just said Johnson has 80.
He asked if there was a formula,
asked
and I
if
said
there
there
was a
is.
formula, and he said based on.
I didn't say I wanted 80.
Okay.
Yeah,
I heard the number 80.
Okay.
So I heard the number 80 tonight.
Yep.
80 less what we currently have is about 25. So it's just not
We
not
over the next
affordable.
10 to 15 years is probably a goal, but there's no way that taxpayers could ever afford that.
I know some of this, obviously, a lot of this is long-term planning and so forth. If we do get those additional 1,500 to 2,000 units in the center of New England, would that change where you would want to put your resources? Well, more Hopkins Hill and Arnold?
I would agree with that. The reason is most of the population's on the east end of town as it is. Most of the calls are, but like I said, if you have the proper staff and the trucks in service, remember, you only have 3 full-time trucks in town. Everything else is cross-manned, and you see how that gets burnt out. Rescue 4 covering, what's the district of Central, 27 square miles. You compare it to Cumberland. Cumberland's 27 square miles, 28 square miles with a population of like 36,000. They have a 75-man job, which do the same amount of calls just as Central. So you have to kind of look, if you're looking for comparisons, it would be something similar like that. But like I said, if you have the staff trucks, you can at least shift them around during the busy hours. Necessarily have to stay in the building.
So,
If you have them.
so I think it would be helpful the next time we have a discussion about manpower or staffing projections. The communities that are similar to Coventry in population are North Providence, South Kingstown, Cumberland, West Warwick, Johnston. Those 5 are the ones that we do a lot of comparison to. If we can find those staff, you guys may know off the top of your heads, but to know what those are staffed at, be helpful. But then again, also I want to be mindful of our folks in the western end on time and age. I think that's another one that we want to, is that something you're supposed to factor in, is kind of the age of your population, or who's more prone to make more calls? Like, I would imagine so.
Yeah, if you look at the developments that have been done over the last few years, and you look at the ages of these people that are in those developments, we've had increased calls. Brand new developments are only 5 years old, and our calls have been increasing in there. And we're only getting how many more? 2,000 more. So you have to kind of plan for that.
I
I
think
don't
the
think
combination,
reacting to it is a good way.
I think the combination of things, if we continue to offer the tax freeze, we're gonna have more and more older people moving into the town to take advantage of that. So it's really combined with other things the town's doing to make this a better system. And no town can, I mean, we're 65 square miles, no comparison than Rhode Island to us. So we're kind of an outlier when it comes to
Yeah.
that.
So with the stations you have here, you're talking 5 stations. Town of West Warwick is 8 square miles, 2 miles wide, 4 miles long, 4 stations, 4 shifts of 15 firefighters. That doesn't include 4 dispatchers, 3 fire marshals, 3 in the communications division, a chief, a deputy chief, and 2 secretaries.
What's,
Mr.
what's,
Testen's-
what's, what, wait, so what's Westworks' total staff?
60 firefighters on the line. 3 fire marshals. 3 in the communications division. That's plan review.
Square mileage?
8 square miles, sorry, 8 square miles.
Coventry is?
64 square miles, 8 times the size. We're 8 times the size. Two secretaries, a chief, a deputy chief. Mr. Testen did not take into account any administrative staff whatsoever other than the fire marshal. So you would need whatever staffing, his clerk, my clerk, however you're gonna match up the tax collections and all that stuff would be put in that way.
And just to add to that, between Coventry, West Warwick, if we're doing a comparison with that, West Warwick's around 9,000 calls per year, that many guys. We're at total, like, what was last year, 7,200? Yeah, 7,200.
All right, so anything else on the staffing projections before we move on? I think we'd welcome, like, if Western wanted to come forward with what they would see as appropriate for distribution, or if any of the other districts wanted to build off of what Mr. Testen's made, I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, I would say for us, I mean, obviously rescue full-time and then either adding our engine or putting Rescue 7 back. So there's dedicated, just in case one of the stations is out, there's another station. I understand there's a bunch of calls and there could be both stations out, but it's just such a long drive between 1, 4, and 6 to get to that end.
Right.
I don't know if that's what, it would just be that. It's either
Getting that rescue back at 7.
either getting the rescue back at 7, having it manned like it was, or, I mean, that would be ideal, or having 2 more full-timers, so 4 at 8. But I mean, ideally the rescue, so there's 2 rescues out there.
Yeah, if we had to think of it in a phased approach.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other districts in terms of distribution? Or apparatus?
I do have one thing. I think
Make sure you speak in the mic.
we talked about staffing. One of the biggest issues we have to worry about too is retention. We're losing a boatload of people to other departments, larger departments. It's one thing we get taken into consideration is keeping the people that we have now.
Just to counter that though, couldn't the districts merge themselves and become one unit outside of the town? Outside of being a municipal department, you guys could all merge and just be one district and be one group and one large group. But just because, I mean, you guys could decide to do that yourselves. Just throwing it out there.
I think he's saying the number of staff in general, whether they're merged, unified or not.
No, okay. What I guess what I heard in his comment was that they're not considered one group right now because they're individual districts. That's what I heard. Maybe I heard it incorrectly. I don't know. I can go back to the tape, but my point is there's nothing stopping a merger outside of. We don't need a municipal fire department
Yes, you do.
on the town side.
All right, great.
Hang on. Because the boards individually could merge themselves and you guys could create one fire district. It doesn't have to be a muni department is my point. And then that would be one consolidated group of all of your guys all together. So I don't know what the difference would be, the number of guys in that group or the muni fire department when you guys first become a fire department under the town. What am I missing?
The biggest thing you're missing is the fire district is basically, it's an antiquated system. And that's the basic reason that we're in this predicament right now is due to poor management from boards. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, we've had board members elected to boards that have
Guys,
absolutely
we
no
gotta keep it back
experience.
to just staffing projections. We can't get into an argument about district versus whatever model. Like, let's just keep it to staffing projection. We're not gonna get anywhere if we go to this right. We gotta keep moving forward here. Is that, okay? I'm sorry, but this is why these things have failed in the past, these chats, because we get in this minutia. So we need to keep moving forward and keep making progress on exploring and studying. Because at the end of the day, it's the town council's decision. It's not anybody sitting in this, well, two of us. Where our job is to study the issue, gather information, give it to the council with with pros and cons, and tell them what we found. Okay. Anything else on what Mr. Testen has presented? Item B under new business, we've got discussion on additional yearly expenses to include review of financial statements, including debt obligations, balance sheets, pension liability, audits, attorney expenses, prospective 5-year CIP for a merged entity, tax collector salary, clerk salary, IT contracts, and payroll services.
Second start,
Okay.
one of the documents I left on the desk for you guys is the additional expense chart. Basically, it's everything that's outside, well, almost everything that's outside of apparatus equipment in the workforce. Basically, your audits, your legal expenses, tax collector and clerk salaries, IT contracts, payroll services. Obviously, if we become one, all of that pretty much goes away because the town will take over all of that responsibility regarding tax collection, payroll, all that gets looped into the town. So this is just a breakdown of what the 4 districts currently pay, and obviously that would be a savings if there was one single entity, whether one single fire district or one single municipal fire department. So that's just a total of those expenses. I'll let Mr. Savetti comment on the other stuff in that section B.
I guess on the other sheet you have, the longer sheet where we tried to lay out based on the discussion we had at the last meeting, the various loans payments, so the debt service requirements of each district. You can see currently there's 5 loans that are currently outstanding. Total balance outstanding as of December 31st, roughly 2.2 million. Annual debt service payments of 345,000. And you can see those extending out through June of 2032. Some may go a little bit beyond that. I think one goes actually to 2039. Obviously, those debt service payments would continue. You know, they're currently factored in everybody's budget, but at least you can see the debt that's there. There are some districts that also have some things in the work for potentially some additional debt that may be coming on board over the next several months. You know, Central Coventry, to name one, is currently looking at acquisition of street lighting, conversion of the street lighting over to LED, which I believe some of the other districts have already completed that. You know, an initial cost, obviously, to do that purchase, finance it, but long-term, you'd have savings per month that's currently been estimated to be about 18,000 per month. So significant savings that you'd see on the cost of the utility, which obviously, if it became part of a town department, the town would have that cost savings going forward. Second section here, we just had the annual tax software. Again, the discussion last meeting, what do we currently pay? Each group pay Vision for the annual cost, Vision or QDS, Vision merged with QDS recently, so you got the annual tax software cost for the 4 entities, about $13,361. Tax billing is somewhat of a mix. We have some of the districts that do it all in-house, so that's the cost of, you know, producing the tax bills plus mailing, and there's some of the districts that actually outsource that, so it costs about $15,000. Again, if they were to become a department of the town, you would have those savings, estimated annual savings about 28,000. And also you wouldn't have the upgrade that Vision or QDS has charged historically. You know, there's no telling, it could be 3 years down the road, it could be 5 years down the road, but you could see at least 3 of the districts. I know, Weston wasn't quite sure what that cost was. They were looking into it, but you can see the other 3 districts you had, cost of 20,000 up to 34,000 approximately. That was recently paid. And then the last item that we just included on here was analysis of some of the pension information. And I think you also have some of the details that actually show the funding status of each of the pension plans for the last 10 years. That comes right from the state's retirement books. But you have here where the employer pension contribution, so the current fiscal year, or again, this is based on the state's fiscal year because the state does everything based on their fiscal year when you're part of the state retirement system. But you can see is for the fiscal year, we're currently in June 30th of 2025. Hopkins Hill has a employer contribution of 11.22% of the eligible wages. Central Coventry is 33.13%. And the Anthony Fire District is 49.28%. And you can see those for each of the next, couple of years. Where fiscal 26, you see slight decrease for Hopkins Hill, and also a decrease for the Anthony District. And then 27, those rates. So gave also a projection, which is again, data just from the state retirement system where you could see what those, based on current salaries or current compensation that are being paid by each district, what it's estimated that annual employer contribution would be. And then the last item just on that page, you have the unfunded actuary accrued liabilities. So again, the state does the annual actuarial valuation. So the most recent one, June 30th, 2024, it shows that the Hopkins Hill Fire District is actually overfunded. So they're at 102.4% of the accrued liability. Central Coventry has an unfunded actuary accrued liability of roughly 4.2 million, but the plan is roughly 77% funded. And the Anthony District has an accrued liability of approximately $3 million, and it's 60.2% funded. So when you look at some of these pension plans, and if you're talking with the state, or just classification from accounting standards, the state considers every pension plan that's under 60% funded to be in critical status. So you can see here, each one of these plans, at least from the most recent valuation, is over that 60%. So they're not classified as critical. And to keep in mind, the state dictates really how much each district's required to fund for their pension plan. To the best of my knowledge, just looking at reports, it appears that every district is making that annual contribution. So some of the reasons you see, a plan that's underfunded, it's just some of those actuarial assumptions, might have been slightly off. If you have some firefighters that are retiring earlier than originally projected, the rate of returns on the investments aren't as good. You have market downturn. So some of those things affect that. I think just by looking at those, funding percentages, certainly if you look at the numbers we talked about just before that, the employer percentage contribution, you can see why that percentage contribution is so high. Just again, not point out Anthony, but Anthony or the Coventry Fire District, we're saying they're at 60.2% funded. And right now their annual contributions at their percentage contribution is 49.28%. So they're at a higher percent because they're lower funded.
It's been at 49 for the last few years, but there were years before that where it was down in the range of like 25 to 30.
Right.
But that's a calculation, as you mentioned, that the state does that takes into account a lot of factors, right? Do you have people out, going out on disability pension? How many staff do you have? And we went down to as little as 8 at one point. And when you have less people contributing, you got to increase the amount that they contribute, right? So, yeah.
Right, and just if I can make one note on the sheet that the town manager went through a little bit earlier, I just noticed on, a couple of the items around here, I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. For some of the district, it does mention street lightings, hydrant rentals. Those costs will still stay, right? Because the street lighting obviously is being paid to Rhode Island Energy. like I mentioned, Central Coventry, if they do the conversion, we anticipate that the street lighting cost there would decrease significantly. And then also the hydrant rental. I don't see that the hydrant rental fees would change any. You guys would know better than me, but I think the hydrant fee rental is
Very
what's charged to
consistent.
Kent County Water, that you charge based on every hydrant. So that's something that obviously the districts cover that the town currently does not pay, but absorb that cost.
Quick question for you, only because we're talking about debt here. Similar to the school where they have a deficit and they had to do a deficit reduction plan. The last statements that I had flipped for Central Coventry had a deficit of 4.7 million. That was the December 31st, 2021 statements. Are you aware of any deficit reduction plan related to that fire district?
Again, to the best of my knowledge, what you're referring to would be the government-wide. The government-wide statement doesn't call for any type of deficit reduction. They look strictly at the fund level. In Central Coventry, we do have, and we could circulate to you, they do have their most recent statement, which was August of 2023. That is showing a fund balance surplus, as I think every district has a fund balance surplus in the governmental fund statement. So that's the only point there would be a deficit reduction plan required. Again, it's not even necessarily required because those entities are not under the guidance of are not subject to the same laws as municipalities.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Easy is it to see how quickly we can act future debt service if now all the taxpayer power payment? Is that thing?
Well, then I think if if you were to bring in without adding additional firefighters, if the districts were to just come into town, there will really be no impact to the taxpayers, right? We'd have to look at the difference in how, maybe what the rate Anthony's charging versus there, but, we can kind of merge that together, but it's really bringing in each of the budgets, right? Because the budgets currently cover their operating costs. I don't think there's any district that's operating right now with a budget that can't sustain its annual cost. So it'd be a matter of bringing all that in, and we may see the combination of it, perhaps, I keep pointing to Anthony, but maybe the Anthony district, their rate would come down a little, maybe Central's rate would come down a little. We have to compare, but we could certainly try to factor in all those budgets, bring them in and then say, okay, what impact does this have on the tax rate? We can do that analysis, put that together. Everybody could just send me their most recent budget, so your current operating budget, just so I have what that number is. Everybody forward that over to me.
Yeah, and I think we're on different fiscal year ending dates too, so that makes a little.
I think just in total, right, we at least know
Yeah.
what what their total budget is for 12 months exactly, and what you're raising, how much you're raising by taxes. So if I can get that actual budgets.
Yeah, and the other big balance sheet liability is OPEB. Yeah, so I didn't see that on here, but that's usually the other one I look at aside from the pension liability.
Right. Yeah, and this came really just from the MERS report where
Yeah.
OPEB would either be, funded separately. Yeah, I know it's Central, they make a contribution to a post-employment.
Yeah.
EHP plan, post-employment health plan. So that's an annual contribution they make. So they have a very small OPEB liability, because that OPEB liability is only on about 4 or 5 former firefighters that have an extended period.
Yeah, we have an OPEB liability, and then we recently, in the last few years, set up something with the trust so that we could fund some, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we can, I'll get a copy of all the different financials and we can do that analysis, Ms. Beck. Get that laid out for you. Yeah, I had circulated tried to lay out the list of the assets and pushed out 10 years to say, okay, when would these pieces of apparatus have to be replaced, but that when it's not here, I went out through an email, but
We're in the same Excel document on different tabs.
right, it was the
I've-
same Excel document, but I think there were a few, I thought there were 2 or 3 folks on the committee that were gonna focus on that, and I never saw any of that come back, so.
Yep, Karen and I are still working on it. We'll get it.
But there's an example. There's an example.
Yeah, so really from that, what's up there, we tried to, I tried to just break down, and if I misclassified something, excuse me, but I'm not a firefighter. Tried to break out the rescues I could know, but between a tanker and, an engine versus tanker or different items. So just put down the information that we had provided, that everybody had provided on the original sheet, broke them down and then just said, okay, this is the original cost. What do we project? The replacement costs for each of those items going forward.
Yeah.
And some
How
of those,
frequently.
yeah, and some of those rescues, obviously, if we're only gonna need 5 of them or 6 of them, we could say, okay, well, these couple would be in reserves, we may not have to replace for 20 years.
The other thing you get to do is if you look at the population of rescues together, right, as a pool, you might say, well, I bought a brand new rescue. Now I've demoted my old rescue to backup. But if I compare that backup rescue to some of the other rescues in town, it has less mileage than someone's primary rescue, So like you could move that over, make that a primary rescue, demote the high mileage vehicle to backup status. And eventually, as you're cycling through, you're selling off the oldest ones,
When you're going through rescues, don't count ours, our backup. It's going away. Yeah, but don't count the other one for reserve or anything.
And also what that does, Madam President, is if you wanted to, say, Brian's plan was you want to put another rescue in service, you're not purchasing that vehicle. We may have one already in the fleet that we can move around. And it's the investment in the personnel, but the equipment's ready.
Yeah. And that's what we said last meeting, and that it's not an issue of trucks available to go into service. It's an issue of staffing for those trucks.
And I just wanted to clarify, going back to the deficit that I spoke of, the 4.7 million, I was talking about the governmental wide statements. So I just wanted to clarify, are you in a surplus on that statement for Central? And do you have like a ballpark of what the deficit is?
If you give me a minute, I'll try to find it.
Okay, I appreciate it, thanks.
Does that include, like, are you looking at the, for the pension deficit audit into it? Okay, okay.
Didn't believe that the negative deficit of 4.7 went to a surplus. That's why I was just clarifying.
Oh, no, we're only we're 76% or 77% funded in the pension, so we're already gonna be that 20%, 24% short. Yeah. But spending year to year, budget to budget, we have a surplus. There's not, we're not.
I get it. It's kind of like what I'm told on the town council, that I should just completely ignore our pension debt when I make decisions. I don't agree with that, because it is a debt that we actually have to pay. That's my point.
I'll have to get back to you. I can't find that right now. Apologize. If you want to, I'm sorry, if you wanted to call up, the financial statement should be on the district's website. They were all posted today. So if you have access to the website, you should be able to see the most recent financial statement.
Could I ask a question? Just, we don't
Absolutely.
have pension, so I'm a little illiterate in this. The more people who pay into it, the less, I don't want to say it costs, but is that how it works? Like the less liability on the town or municipal, or you were kind of alluding to that a little bit?
It has to do with how many people you are paying in and how long they're paying in,
Okay.
right? So if you hire 25-year-old firefighters and you're employed for, 30 years and they're paying in for 30 years, you're going to have a more healthy, pension system than if you're hiring, that's why they talk about like, do I want to accept lateral transfers versus do I want to hire just straight out of the academy, right? If you go and hire or, laterals from other departments and you put people on your books that are closer to retirement and not contributing as long as, and then there's injuries that you have to fund, you can quickly go down a, pension spiral, right?
Thank you.
And just for the public who was listening, I pulled up the August 31st, 2023. Is that the most recent? 'Cause that's what's on the website as the most recent. And the net deficit is 4,731,000. Thanks.
So, I think we need I'd like to see the OPEB numbers to help round this out. I'd like to see this document that has the staff. I went through and did quick math on the ones that would assumed to be absorbed into town services. I would like to see what's being subtracted there across the board, but also we need to account for how much would it be to add the IT person or someone in the tax office. So I think it's seeing what that adds up to, pull back, but how much of that are we retaining to pay for, say, 2 new positions, whether it's for the tax office and or IT. And then in the same document, we're bringing all together just hydrants and lights, making sure we're getting just that. Obviously, we can just add it up right now, but it would be nice to just have it clean. Yeah. Any other discussion on the yearly expenses item? Anything, any more information related to this that folks want, or scenarios to see? All right. Business carried over, discussion on average cost of maintenance contracts, interview prospective service and maintenance contract estimates for a merged entity.
So the average is about $48,000. Is a number, average of all the contracts that they have and that they provided to us.
Okay, so we just did like a mean for each one and then added those total. But we obviously won't know unless someone actually went. Right. To the districts in the room, does that like sound? Or do you think it's more of a range? It should be considered more of a range.
This is for what?
All of your vendor contracts, maintenance contracts. This was on like one of the last pages or yeah.
I still have that.
Multi-page letter, legal.
I think that sounds about right. I mean, on an average every year, it's probably about 50,000 in a budget that we're looking at for those different services put together, yeah.
Is this debt schedule discussion here on business carried over separate and apart from the one we just had or no? Okay. So we should have a CIP, a more complete CIP picture by the next meeting, you think? Okay. Which is the 13th? Does anyone have anything else on any of those items? I just want to reemphasize, I'm not looking to shut anybody down or shut anybody's opinions down. I just want to make sure that this group stays laser focused on looking at bringing information together. We know that there have been attempts to have these conversations in the past that have died almost immediately on arrival. I think this group is the group that can make it through this exercise of compiling this information in whatever a unified entity looks like. And I just want to make sure that we're really looking to put together what a unified entity looks like to deliver to the council, who ultimately makes that decision. So I respect everybody in this room. I know everybody in this room, for one thing, gives a damn about this town and cares about the safety, welfare, and what's best for Coventry. And I appreciate that. But I just want to make sure that we're keeping our eye on the ball and we're moving things forward. So I appreciate the discussion we're having here. I'm not looking to shut people down. That's not at all what I'm trying to be about. I just want to make sure that we're moving forward. And I don't want to see this group come to blows here. This is an important task we have in front of us. So thank you. If there's nothing else for discussion, I will take a motion to adjourn at 7:04 PM.
Make the motion.
Motion by Councilman LeBlanc,
Second?
second by Mr. Testen. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We stand adjourned.